Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. Mr. Terry as I continue my search for historical knowledge found here on YouTube. Alright, today's video comes from our awesome patrons over at Patreon because this week they voted on this. And that is Europe's Unexploded Bomb Problem by the channel Real Life Lore, which is a really cool channel. So this is an interesting one. Maybe it was about a couple weeks ago, if you saw, there was a video that we watched on... it was weapons have been banned or something like that. And I remember one of the things that was in there was landmines. And one of the things I remember they brought up was from the world wars, how many unidentified or unclaimed or whatever, like landmines there are still out in places like Europe from the war that you'd think today would be not functional, but is still really scary. And yeah, and there's so many of them that I forgot they had some absurd number that they estimate that are still out there. So this should be an interesting thing, I think, to do, and definitely I think I can turn and put in my classroom. So we'll check this out. Thank you again to those patrons. If you would like to get involved with voting on Patreon, you can join down below. The pledges start about $1 a month, depending on what tier you want, and all of them will though get you access to voting. Okay, and look in the near future for some other tiers, for some other things to come up. Thank you for the support for that and all the different ways that you support me. All right, the original video is down below. Make sure you go down below and click on the link to the original video so you can give them a like, view, subscribe, view time, all of that important stuff. So we're doing that as we're trying to spread history here on the internet. Okay, hopefully I can add a few things if I can. So if you haven't subbed or enabled notifications as well, that'd be great. The shirt I'm wearing is still up for sale on Teespring. It's our cool World War II shirt, so check that out as well. And let's go ahead and stop talking and learn about bombs and unexploded ones. Sounds scary. We better get ready though. I mean, if this is, we got to be prepared. So helmets on. And let's figure this out.
This video was made possible by Brilliant. Start achieving your learning goals for 20% off by being one of the first 200 people to sign up at brilliant.org/reallifelore. Wars always have long-lasting consequences, and Europe in particular has had more than its fair share in the past century. Both of the world wars, along with more recent conflicts like the Yugoslav wars and the ongoing war in Donbass, have littered the continent with millions of bombs, shells, landmines, and grenades. And a lot of these explosives still remain undetonated where they were fired or dropped decades ago. In this way, the echoes of these long-distance wars still roar across the continent from time to time and claim new victims for old conflicts.
That's what I was wondering, is are there instances that we know of people getting hurt by these unexploded bombs? Again, you'd think, you know, after like 60 years they wouldn't be functional, but you never know, right?
Reminder that the price of war has aftershocks and consequences that last well beyond the lifetimes of the people who fought in them. Wars affect generations of people after they are fought. And here is how a century of conflict in Europe continues to violently affect the lives of people who live there today. This is a map of Europe that shows where the highest concentrations of leftover unexploded ordnance, or UXOs, exist.
Spain,
the most heavily affected.
I mean, that must be from the Spanish Civil War then, though? If they're down there, because the regular fighting didn't happen as much there, so maybe from the Spanish Civil War.
Regions are Spain from the Spanish Civil War, the northeast of France and Belgium from the First World War, the area around London and southern England from the Blitz.
Weren't that scared of the fact that, you know, people, I know it's really common when you go and visit the trenches from World War I up in France, that a lot of people I know bring metal detectors, so I wonder if a lot of those have been found. But if you get off the beaten path a little bit, all of a sudden you might find something. Kind of something interesting to think about if you do go and visit those trenches, which is something I would love to do.
Germany and Italy from years of bombing and fighting in the Second World War, Bosnia and Croatia from the Yugoslav wars, and eastern Ukraine from the ongoing war in Donbass. So let's begin with Spain. Since the 1980s, the Spanish authorities have recovered and disarmed over 750,000 pieces of explosives left over from the Spanish Civil War, fought in the 1930s. Even during the 2010s, over 1,000 pieces of leftover artillery shells, bombs, or grenades were still discovered and destroyed across the country every year. But the situation in other countries is even more extreme. Let's take a look at France,
gotta be
and
on the
specifically the northeastern part of the country.
Yeah.
During the First World War, the German Empire invaded through Belgium and then moved on to invade and occupy a large part of northeastern France. The two sides fired millions of tons of shells at one another across the front line that developed here during the war, and approximately 1 in 3 of these shells never actually detonated.
Wow, 1 in 3. There would have been so many. This line would be, you'd think, the one that would have the most, just because the fronts in World War I didn't move very much, especially as compared to World War II. They were all done, I mean, a lot of it within 30 miles or so of each other, especially if you're specifically talking about northern France there. And that seems like to be the place to have the most, because that was so much more about defense than so much of the offensive movement that came from World War II. But similarly, as many of you know, the same route was taken by the Germans, basically avoiding the French, the border that's specifically between Germany and France, and electing to go through Belgium, which was less defended in both wars.
In the Ypres salient alone, it's believed that 300 million projectiles the British and Germans fired at one another were duds, and most of them have never been recovered. The bombs and shells were buried when they hit the ground or swallowed up by the mud, and they occasionally come back up to the surface over time. So because of the millions of tons of unexploded bombs still lurking about, the French government established this zone in the northeast of the country after the end of the war, and the red area in particular here became known as Zone Rouge, the area of France that was the most severely destroyed and ravaged by the conflict with the highest concentrations of unexploded shells. Human settlement, habitation, and trespassing in the zone were forbidden, and the area was left alone to return back to nature. What's crazy though is that there are still some areas within the Zone Rouge that are off limits to humans even today in 2020. And in some of these areas, the concentration of unexploded shells are as high as 300 per 10,000 square meters in just the top 15 centimeters of soil, which...
What? Would you be willing to go in there, even though it's been so long? Get a metal detector, try to find some souvenirs. Would you do that?
Is about the same size as just a single city block. 99% of all plant life continues to die in these areas even today because of the vast amounts of lead, mercury, arsenic, and other poisons that have contaminated the soil. The French authorities continue to remove around 900 tons of shells from the area every year, and ever since the end of the war in 1918,
for construction.
630 French and over 20 Belgian clearers have lost their lives trying their best to heal the scar and return the land to its original beauty.
Wait, let's go back to that. What is this stat?
From the area every year, and ever since the end of the war in 1918, 630 French and over 20 Belgian clearers have lost their lives trying their best to heal the scar and return the land to its original beauty.
So how many people have died trying to clear those bombs? Whoa.
It may take 300 more years before the last of the Zone Rouge is successfully cleared back to normal. And so it remains an ugly scar across France that reminds us of darker times. But Europe has even more scars on her face that came from conflicts after the First World War. Let's take southern England for example. Between 1940 and 1944, the German Reich dropped 30,000 tons of bombs across the United Kingdom during the Blitz. Most of these landed across London and southern England, and many of them never exploded and remain hidden across the area today, like old, sleeping Nazi sentinels just waiting to claim even more victims in our modern age.
Even
in
duds would be
2007,
scary.
a bomb was discovered in Plymouth that required the evacuation of 1,000 people, and in 2018, another big German bomb was discovered underwater in the Thames, which forced London City Airport to cancel all of their flights while it was
Wow,
defused.
they put them up there?
Every so often, the discovery of an old bomb somewhere in England triggers the evacuation of thousands. But the discovery of old bombs in Germany will sometimes trigger the evacuation of tens of thousands. While Germany only managed to drop 30,000 tons of bombs on the UK, the Allies managed to, in turn, drop 1.35 million tons of bombs on Germany.
People forget that. They forget how badly the Allies just annihilated the Germans in World War II. Now, the big difference in World War I and World War II is once the Allies were crossing into the German border, that's when the armistice happened. So they were able to largely avoid a lot of the fighting on German soil. But of course, World War II was different because after D-Day out in the West, and then with the success of the Soviet Union pushing back in the East, the Germans did not surrender when those borders were breached. They kept fighting. But yeah, the amount it gets kind of underappreciate a lot, and it's a lot of where people talk about with the Allies how devastating they were because of how many civilians the Allies killed in these bombings of civilian cities.
10% of these never exploded, so that's 13,500 tons of bombs that continued to exist in Germany following their surrender in 1945, which makes German bomb diffusers the busiest in the entire world.
Hope they get hazard
discover
pay.
and disarm one roughly every 2 weeks in the country on average. Some notable recent discoveries include a 1.8-ton RAF bomb found in Koblenz in 2011 that caused 45,000 people to be evacuated, a 500-pound American bomb found in Munich in 2012 that was blown up on site, which you can watch in this spectacular video here on YouTube.
Whoa.
Another 1.8-ton RAF bomb found in Augsburg in 2016 that caused the evacuation of 54,000 people, and another really big British bomb found in downtown Frankfurt during construction work in 2019 that prompted the evacuation of 70,000 people from the area, the largest evacuation in Germany's entire history post-World War II. Smaller bomb discoveries and evacuations happen every year in cities all across Germany. Just another lasting consequence of a war fought 80 years ago that affects the lives of people still living there today. But the hardest hit area of Europe suffers the consequences of UXOs from a much more recent conflict,
a little bit more
Bosnia and Croatia. Between 1991 and 2001, the former Yugoslavia descended into civil war and chaos that tore the country apart and paved the way to independence for many of the nationalities that lived there.
This is scary too because of how recent this stuff is. Because you'd think, again, a lot of the World War II stuff would be not very functional anymore, but this is not that long ago. Some of the stuff's 20 years. It's very, very fresh.
In Bosnia particularly, all 3 competing factions within the country during the wars collectively deployed over 2 million landmines to protect their defensive lines. Bosnia and Herzegovina is not a big country, and that war wasn't a long time ago, and as a result, Bosnia has the worst landmine contamination problem of any country in the world today. This is a map of all 28,699 locations of landmines remaining in the country as of 2013. 2.4% of all Bosnia's land is contaminated by mines. So for the sake of comparison, if 2.4% of America's land was the same, it would be as if the entire state of Michigan was one gigantic active minefield. Over 80,000 individual active landmines are believed to still exist across these areas of Bosnia, and they continue to hurt people all the time. During the actual war in Bosnia, landmines killed 3,399 people in the country, but since the war ended, the landmines have continued to kill an additional 1,750 people, all of whom had to violently die completely needlessly after the peace was already signed and agreed to.
That's crazy because what did they say, 650 for in France? 650 since World War II, and this is 1750 since 1996. That's incredible. And again, places like Bosnia, they're not big at all. So that means they're everywhere. You'd be afraid to do any construction projects, infrastructure projects. That's probably a huge part of when they need to build, buildings and roads and stuff like that. They bring in surveyors, I bet, to test all that, and would still, just with all those deaths, be very scary. Again, I was saying earlier, I hope those guys are getting hazard pay that have to go clear this stuff.
Landmines kill indiscriminately and without mercy, and the majority of victims are always children and civilians. Bosnia and Herzegovina is actively trying their best to clear the country of these ugly scars, but without a source of serious funding, that goal is nowhere close on the horizon. And nearby Croatia, too, is a country that continues to be plagued by the scourge of landmines. Just like in Bosnia, every side in the Croatian War of Independence used landmines landmines extensively, to the point where 1.5 million were deployed across the country. As of 2013, this is a map of the location for all of the minefields that continue to exist here. 31,000 total mines, marked by over 12,000
right through the
warning
heart of the
signs that
nation.
places 1 out of every 5 Croatians within close proximity to an active landmine. Since the end of the war in Croatia, leftover landmines have killed over 500 people and severely injured 1,500 more by causing life-changing injuries like the loss of a leg. The landmine situation in both Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina are national tragedies that continue to claim victims every single year from wars that ended decades ago.
It started to make sense when I was referring at the beginning of this video to the video we talked about weapons that are banned now for landmines. It's not the use. It's like it's not so much about the use of them and the ethics of using them in war. It's this kind of stuff where you can't account for them and they become devastating in peacetime, which could cause a lot of issues too. So all of a sudden that starts to make more sense, right?
Landmines are simply evil and should never be used during any war because of how indiscriminately they kill, regardless of age, regardless of profession, and regardless of even time. Wars always have lasting consequences, and they sometimes stretch out into the future like ghosts to claim fresh victims, sometimes born generations after their intended targets were. Now, I know that ending was a pretty depressing way to leave this video off, so let me breathe back a bit of optimism here. While scientific thinking to fight wars in the 20th century created some evils like mass strategic bombing, landmines, or rocket attacks, they also created some good out of the ashes, like jet aircraft that allowed for the revolution in global transportation, and rocket technology that eventually got humans into space and the moon. Good things which you can learn all about how to do yourself and more right now in the classical mechanics course that's offered over at Brilliant.
Make
It's
your own
never too
rockets.
early or too late in life to learn something new, and what makes Brilliant so special is that they help you learn the kinds of things that you were forced to and maybe struggled
good
with when
things
you were
about
a
this
kid.
service.
Physics, calculus, computer science, algebra, and more.
As an
But
educational
they actually
tool.
make it all fun and approachable. The feeling of achievement when you finally understand something inconceivably complicated is amazing, and Brilliant's teaching style of breaking down big, scary concepts into their smaller, more intuitive chunks makes that possible to experience for everyone, including you. You can even do this on the go with their app. And if you're the type of person without a lot of free time, but who still wants to learn new things, you can set a goal to do each of their daily challenges in those small free moments whenever you get them. And best of all, if you're one of the first 200 people to sign up at brilliant.org/reallifelore, or by clicking the link down in the description, you'll even get 20% off. And as always, thank you for watching.
Cool. Okay. All right. Good stuff there. Yeah, the issue is definitely bigger than I think I had realized, just for how many unclaimed ones were, and that they still can be, even those ones from World War II. I get the more recent ones, but the World War II ones even, that they can still be very destructive and kind of work. You know what I mean? And yeah, I didn't realize the numbers were as big. And then again, like I was saying at the end there, it makes a little more sense why this has been generally agreed upon as a weapon that is banned basically from future use. Doesn't mean people won't ever do it, but it is something that has basically been agreed upon and is now seen as a war crime. So that makes sense. All right. I mean, that's amazing that unfortunately people today have to pay, the price for these things from, generations past. And that's one of the sad things, right, about war, and then how war-torn Europe has been for so long, and people still doing that. And then, wars are recent, like you saw down there in Serbia and Bosnia. Tragedies that way with the destruction that unfortunately has happened. So, all right. Okay, with that, awesome. Thank you, patrons. You guys voted on this week, so thank you for doing that. And new poll will be up, so I'd love to hear and see what you guys are going to be choosing for us to watch later on. All right, a few plugs on the way out. Also, to add to the things before, the new gaming channel is up and thriving. There's a link down below. Do a lot of gaming videos and gaming-related stuff. Over there, definitely do that. And again, links to Patreon, our Discord server. We also have just recently, within the last week, have launched the History Minecraft server. So people are in there having a lot of fun, creating all kinds of historically themed things over there. Best way to get in touch with that is join our Discord server where you can get the IP and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, with that, just trying to make more and more awesome historically related stuff for you guys to spend your time in and hopefully keep learning, as that's what I'm trying to do. All right, and with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.